Hey, everybody. Really excited for this topic today as a longtime wireless geek, talking the promise of ubiquitous connectivity with a true innovator in the space at DenseAir. Mark, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me. Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. We should have
Yeah,
hopefully.
likewise. And before that, maybe introduce yourself, a little bit about your bio and background, and who is DenseAir?
So, DenseAir is a company really concentrating on solving the in-building and near-building problems that the industry faces. It started overseas with quite a different business proposition, which we won't get into today. But let's just say we pivoted to the U.S. and pivoted to in-building in a pretty strong way because we saw a need that was developing in the marketplace. Myself, people will probably hear it as we get going. I'm Canadian, electrical engineer, telecom background by training, and then I really, I guess pivoted into lots of different areas and coming back into the wireless and cellular space, serving businesses and owners, enterprises is actually pretty exciting for me over the last year and a bit here.
Fantastic. Well, once you're in wireless, it's like the mafia. You can't get out.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been in
Oh, it's really
35
the best.
years.
Yeah.
Started in paging and here we are today. In any case, talk about the high level business proposition at DenseAir, cellular connectivity, in commercial, real estate environments, hospitality and beyond. What's big picture? What's the state of play? What's the state of the union as
Yeah.
far as meeting our expectations?
It's a funny thing. There's really a couple different ways to answer that. I think let's start with why should we care at all as a business? Like the business will only exist because there has to be a fundamental need, and the fundamental need here is people. It's people. It's personal. We need to be able to connect. That's a very fundamental need. We need to be able to go to an event, go to a wedding, take pictures and videos and upload them. That's fundamental. That's an expectation now. We need to be able to go to a restaurant, have a great meal, and when we're finishing that meal, pull up an Uber, pull up a map and say, this is how I'm going to the next place. Right. And the list goes on. Like if you can't do those fundamental things these days, that's problematic. So I think it starts with a very personal thing. It goes up a level. When you think about businesses, many businesses, I guess, have a lot more power now. They're requiring that their employees have the ability to connect all the time. We're working with various, Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies that are going wireless only in their offices. They are demanding that they have both cellular and Wi-Fi coverage. Uh, Quite honestly, the employees themselves are demanding it. I can think of two Fortune 5, Fortune 10 companies who surveyed their employees in the tech industry. And the employees said, no, I'm not using Wi-Fi. It's my personal device. Not happening. You need to serve this place with cellular. And that's actually what the marketplace is demanding. The big law firms, the big engineering firms, it's all the same thing. So more and more, it is really becoming a dual solution of Wi-Fi and cellular. That's another thing that's happening. And then, heck, think about Gen Z. Gen Z is now making up a quarter of the workforce and growing rapidly. And Gen Z is the first generation that is digital first. So they expect there's no such thing as I'm not connected and I'm not able to do it. So when you think about buildings, whether it's a hotel, it's an office building, et cetera, it's, obviously the higher ed schools, they are having to think about that 10 and 20-year investment in those buildings with those types of people in mind. So it's really created kind of again, I started from that personal standpoint, starting to get more business related. These are the types of things that people need to consider. I guess there's one other key point, and Evan, I think you'll probably know this stat. 80% of all calls occur within the building. That's a shocking thing. So in some ways, you can think of it like an iceberg. You look at an iceberg and you see the big, huge iceberg. It's like, wow, look at that. That's huge. Well, actually, 80% of it is underwater. That's the equivalent. That's what's happening in the cellular space as well. So if you have that scenario, and then you couple it with the fact that carriers can no longer afford to invest in in-building, right? They spend all their money on 5G. There's capital constraints, heavy OpEx overload. So they're not investing on in-building anymore. So you have 80% of your traffic, 80% of your interactions with these people in mobile happening in building. while the carriers are at the same time saying, I can't afford to invest there. So guess what? That's opportunity. It's problem. It's a whole new set of buyers. And we can keep going. I mean, the reality is then the buyers, like who's buying them? The carriers were buying, right? So the carriers, they were the ones, they were taking largely their existing solutions, their existing price points, the existing KPIs, existing all that stuff, and saying, okay, I'll come to play. Usually it's one carrier, a single carrier, go serve up a building, and periodically you'd have two, and it would be a very rare day that you'd have all three participating in the building, and that just doesn't fly anymore because suddenly it's the owners, and the owners are just saying, look, I just need it to work. I don't need all your KPIs. I don't need all your other stuff. But when it does work, it needs to be at a different price point. I need all three carriers, and it's really changed the game. So it's actually a very fun space to be in right now. Lots of change, which is
Lots of
which is
change, and yet
yeah.
it's people have been coming at this space with different kinds of solutions for a couple decades with mixed results. So companies have tried to fix this with different approaches, and some good, some indifferent, some haven't worked. Why haven't they all worked as well as we had anticipated?
I think first of all, this change in ownership and who has to pay what really didn't start until say 2019, 2020. Sounds like it relates to COVID. It really, well, I guess it maybe that helped it along, but really that had more to do with the carrier investment and their 5G rollout, and when they started bearing the burden of those costs. Um, so I think the impetus, the drivers weren't there is one, right? As long as the carriers are still willing to pay, why would we change? Why would the owners pick up the buck if their carriers are still playing? So even though you've been talking about solutions for a while, there hasn't been a need. And then most of the solutions, well, first of all, let's start with the basics. The solutions can start from the biggest events and venue centers, biggest conference centers. Distributed antenna systems have been around forever. They do that very well, very dense set of users, and they're going to be around for a long, long time. And the types of solutions we bring to bear do not work in that space. So um, a DAS world totally exists for very good reasons. On the other end of the spectrum, you have things like repeaters, things that amplify outside signals. Again, they have a very good place for smaller spaces as long as you have the capacity outside, and that's ever changing. We're working on actually several contracts right now where people have tried the repeater, and unfortunately in this case it didn't work. And we are, ripping out those solutions. The reality is, though, that there are different solutions for good reasons. There is no one size fits all, and really, but there's been a missing element, and that's in the kind of 100K to several 100K up to 1 million square feet. But really, in that middle space, there's been no great solution that's fit the price point. So you talk about people that have tried it. I think the part that hasn't fit is how do you solve for that several 100,000 square feet at a price point with a solution that gets it all done, in a fast and easy way that the owners of a building are willing to get behind. So we can go into more detail there if you want.
Yeah, and we'll dive into the technology. Just to first on the business side, what are the consequences of having poor connectivity? I mean, obviously, guests, visitors, employees are frustrated. It's difficult to build an ROI on frustration, but increasingly, it's like revenue, right? There's actual revenue loss there. There's safety. There's security. There's new kinds of devices we're connecting with the Internet of Things that have to work
Yeah,
for different reasons. What does the business side look like now versus maybe a few years ago?
I think that's a good question, and I'll take one direction on that is the businesses. Security is paramount and becoming even more of a discussion all the time. Like I was on a train with a young consultant on the way from DC to New York before Christmas, and he asked about the business, and I gave kind of the description we talked about. He said, "Why should I even care?" I said, well, how are you connecting on your laptop right now? Because and he said cellular. I said, why? Oh, my company won't let me connect via Wi-Fi. The train I'm
Mm,
not allowed. Like, I think I'm gonna get fired. I said, okay, well, you just made my point for me. The reality is that security is paramount, and it's actually a pretty tough thing to accomplish on Wi-Fi today. To get a similar level of security, a little bit less because there's never hardware security in a Wi-Fi world. It takes money and it takes effort, technical know-how,
mm.
and again, going back to the conversation I just said, the owners in this case, they're building owners. They're not tech people. They're not carriers. So they don't know, they don't really want to or know how to take on that level of, bring that level of security. So that is very definitely one thing. I think, when I think about smart buildings, IoT, private networks, we're concentrated on I guess we call it the carpeted space. So think, consumer, commercial real estate and hospitality. We can move into higher ed. Mixed use is a very good area for us. And in that space, the private networking and IoT smart buildings is, well, first of all, it got a bit of a bad rap. Lots of failed promises, and it's more than just a black eye. And commercially, it's been challenging over the last years coming out of COVID, and return to office being slower. But it's coming back, and it will continue to improve. So I think that having a solution that enables that. And I think in that case, those devices can connect by Wi-Fi, they can connect by cellular, etc. I think back to I was meeting with a chief operating officer of one of the largest real estate firms that it's probably five or so firms that really control Manhattan, and they're definitely one of them. And he said, "Look, I meet with my peers, and I say, if you're connecting your building to anything other than cellular, yeah, like I don't even know if I can talk to you anymore." It was pretty funny. He kicked off this meeting. Never met the guy, and he was very opinionated, and for a good reason. So yeah, it's things are changing.
They are. Let's dive into the technology side. Everyone's in the space has heard about small cells, but let's talk about neutral hosted small
Mm.
cells. How would you describe them? What are they? How are they becoming, the standard sort of go-to approach for in-building connectivity?
Well, neutral host, I think there's a technical way to think about it, and then there's just a business way to think about it. The business way to think about it, and that, by the way, that's one of the things that I think really sets us apart. We really look at the customer side first: who's buying and what do they care about. At the end of the day, our customer is the building owner, and
Mm.
that building owner just needs things to work quickly, easily, and across all carriers. And so for neutral host, for them, that means, look, just tell me I get the carriers, right? They work, right? And so we don't say neutral host to them, but that's essentially what it means. So neutral host allows us to bring, in an easy technological fashion, all, in this case, really it's three carriers in the US at this point, to the table, as quickly and easily as possible. Our technology, we're trying to be technology agnostic, but uh, the technology we lead with right now allows us to do a single contract, single agreement with the carriers, and quite easily add new buildings as required, which is fantastic. It's not the industry norm, so we're able to do things in you know like 90 days instead of 9 months or 12 months or 14 months. It's fun. So neutral host, that's probably the simplest way to think about it.
Fantastic. And, you talk a lot about shared infrastructure. Explain what that means and how it works and why it's, really game-changing innovation for property owners and the tenants.
Yeah, I mean, the shared infrastructure is really a carry on to that neutral host conversation. What you need to be able to do is, deploy a single set of hardware. Uh, Ideally, that looks and feels like IT infrastructure, right? It's easy. Use the existing fiber, install a switch, install, as little as possible that is different than what they know. Use PoE. For those that are technical, is rather than pulling separate power, you're running your power over the Ethernet cable. Install a single radio, a single device that looks like an access point on the ceiling that serves all three carriers and the required signal that those need to serve anybody with any phone, wherever they're at, whether they're in a room at a hotel, whether they're walking around a common, on a common walkway at a mixed use, say 10-acre, 20-acre, site, or in their office building. And that's what that allows you to do.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. So when I walk around Mobile World Congress, I see lots of in-building players and different
Yeah.
solutions. How do you stand out and differentiate yourself in this marketplace?
Well, I think we are an end-to-end provider. So think about it from design, build, implement, maintain. From the design side, we do something pretty unique. We have a very large, trillions of data points set of I guess information on buildings, what the signal inside buildings, both the power and quality or capacity, that exists inside every building inside the U.S. And for that matter, bare ground. And so we take that, we acquire some of that data, we buy, and then we also have our own ability to capture that data. And yeah, I've got to tell you, it's a wonderful tool. And it is unique because we get told over and over again, how do I get it? Can I buy it from you? Can we license it? It's not our core business. So the answer is no, but we're happy to we're working with many partners now, and it's increasing all the time. Trip out next week to do exactly that, is to talk to folks and say, hey, look, we don't sell this, but we'll make it available to you. Let's talk about your portfolio. Let's look at your portfolio. You don't know where problems exist, right? Because the only way that occurs right now is people rely on a word of mouth. So I'll tell you what, let's take word of mouth out of it. Let's use 1,000 data points that we have across each of the carriers over the last 6 months. And let's look where you actually have issues. And then let's solve for those issues and proactively based on what's going on, where you're at in your building life cycle. So we take a very customer centric approach, and then when we look at designing the building, actually the same thing. We use data, so we don't have to do a custom design every time, which is kind of the industry norm. We use machine learning to take what we've done historically and model out exactly what's going to be required for that building that we're looking at now.
Mm.
Allows us to scale very effectively, use technology to our advantage, allows us to be, quite frankly, keep our costs down, but at the same time be more accurate than most of our peers. And when it comes down to building it, we've got a fantastic operations team, come from running some massive networks for the carriers, et cetera. And and building that and maintaining it is pretty critical. So I think, look, we aren't the only game in town. We aren't the only. In fact, I'm happy to say that. If you ever say we're unique and nobody's like us, well then you should probably be a little bit worried. You should see competition, and then you should strive to solve it better. And I think we are.
Fantastic. Do you care to call out any, sites or examples where you're making a difference? I mean, you're in hotels, airports, stadiums. What do you
I mean,
like
there's
to
a
call out?
couple that are public at this point, and others that are just about there. It might be the largest garage in the world, Millennium Parking Garage in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
It's like 4.5 million square feet across 4 different sites. We haven't rolled out all of it at this point, but we have a great relationship with them. Went through a pilot. They were thrilled with the pilot and looking to deploy a lot more of that garage over the coming months and years. That kind of facility is critical. Connectivity is very critical in places like that.
Oh, yeah.
I
Talk about
remember,
location-based services and
yeah, all
physical
this stuff. Like
security. And
when it's that big, I tell you what, where is my car? Like find my car is a fundamental thing. It is massive. I've been in there a couple times, and if you aren't with somebody, understanding where your car is. So then think about this: the moment you drive into the garage, that's the end of your coverage for you and for security. Everybody, there's nobody. You get to the bottom of the ramp, it's over. So that's a fundamental problem when you think about garages. Um, Hilton Singer Island Resort is
Mm.
another one that we've announced. They're a gorgeous resort down on the coast of Florida. on Singer Island, I guess to be more precise. And they've had for years serious coverage issues. Customers always complaining, et cetera. We have another one we're working with in California, not announced yet. I mean, these places where you walk out the front door to make a call because you couldn't wait, make one inside. And what do you
Wow.
see? Three or four other people beside you doing exactly the same thing. And that's a problem for places that charge pretty high nightly rate. People expect, going back to my how we started this conversation, people that just expect this to work these days, and if it doesn't, then people that needs to be solved for.
Yeah, that's a great point. So looking ahead, where do you see yourself headed this year? Any plans that you can reveal? What are you excited about as we head into the rest of the year?
So I guess one of the things that I'm really quite happy about is we started working with some strong industry players, some people that have a lot of properties, dozens and dozens, in some cases hundreds and hundreds of buildings. And it's nice to be in a situation where we're working with them on initial buildings and they are fundamentally behind the solution saying, let's get these initial buildings going. And oh, by the way, here's the list of all of our buildings in the US. Let's start prioritizing. Let's use your tool to figure out where we're going next. Let's figure out where they are in the building life cycle. Every building has its own life cycle. Every company deals with their investment in buildings differently, but then every building has its own as well, which is it's a unique conversation we could have another day, Evan. But that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about the engagement and the desire for the owners. Because let's face it, this is new. They have not historically paid for this stuff, right? So they are, for the first time, having to budget for this stuff, for the first time, having to pay for this stuff. The vast majority of them, other than the very largest owners. So for them, it's an education process, and to be able to go along for them, kind of arm in arm for the ride, it's fantastic. And doing that successfully this year is what I see happening.
Well, fantastic! Congratulations on all the success and such an important mission. Good luck and onwards and
Thanks, Evan.
upwards.
I appreciate it.
Likewise. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. Take care.
Thanks all.